Now, the big victory for him, the huge victory, is that the murder charge in federal court was recently dismissed on technical grounds. That's huge. And the reason that it's huge is because the Department of Justice had expressed their intent to seek the death penalty against him. What's good, people? I'm Attorney John Mobley. I have prosecuted and litigated complex civil and criminal cases for over 30 years, and I'm still actively litigating these cases today. My experience was forged in the legal trenches, going toe-to-toe with some of the best lawyers in the country, and I'm still actively litigating these cases. On this podcast, I'll be giving no-holds-barred, hard-hitting legal analysis on the legal issues that are gripping the nation. But you want to hear more than just legalese or legal mumbo-jumbo. It's important to have the perspective of a non-lawyer. So my assistant Kayla is joining me in the podcast, and she's going to ask me the tough questions for which you want the answers. So please join me on Legal Deep Dives and listen to me call it like I see it. What's good, people? Welcome to Legal Deep Dives. Attorney John Mobley here. Kayla is joining me today. Thank you, Kayla. Always great to see you. I'm sure they all love seeing you too. I think they like seeing you better than they like seeing me. And we are here today to talk about the hottest legal topics and cases that are gripping the country. You always have your pulse on what the people want to hear. And before we start, I'm going to ask everyone to go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast to make sure you get all the legal updates. I want to welcome you to the club room. Well, I'm going to call it like I see it. Kayla, I know you're ready to ask me the tough questions. Give it to me.
All right, let's talk about it. If anybody else is as confused as me, they're going to need a little bit of an update recap on what is going on with Mr. Luigi Mangione.
The Italian stallion himself. Okay, well, to give everyone out there just a brief recap of the factual circumstances underlying this case, Mangione carried out and executed a premeditated murder of the CEO of a large health insurance company called United Healthcare. It's really kind of a slam dunk case, it's just, it's a slam dunk case. However, despite the fact that this is a premeditated murder, the public, to say they were unsympathetic would be an understatement, because this insurance company had a history and reputation of denying payment of legitimate medical treatment for individuals that had health insurance with them, resulting in people, dying, and being denied critical, health care. So the public response was, they were cheering it. They were being sarcastic, unsympathetic, making public posts on social media, expressing, almost gratitude for what Mangione did, and it kind of, brought to light that the phrase that came out of it was deny, delay, defend, which is what insurance carriers do to avoid paying claims. They deny it, they delay paying it, and then they will defend paying it in court if you file a lawsuit. And of course, what happens while all this is going on is if you need that critical health care and that treatment's not being paid for, you're going to die before the case can even be resolved.
Yeah.
But yeah, he became somewhat of a folk hero for carrying out that cold-blooded execution of that CEO.
Oh.
And as a result, he was charged with murder in state court of New York, along with other charges. Whenever somebody's charged with criminal charges, there's always like a main charge, like the murder or the armed robbery or the sexual assault, but there are all these other ancillary charges they tack on to it to make sure that the person serves as much time as possible. So there's always one major offense and a bunch of other lesser offenses that may carry time, but not the serious, most what I call predicate offense. So he was charged with those charges in state court, and one of those charges was act of terrorism. He was also charged in federal court with federal charges and murder in federal court as well. And once he was charged with murder in federal court, the Department of Justice indicated their intent to seek the death penalty based on the murder in federal court.
All right. What's the latest update? What's going on with the case? Where is it at right now?
Well, things are going pretty good for the Italian Stallion. You know, first he's become such a popular figure, almost like a Robin Hood folk hero type. Is that he's received at this point on his 28th birthday, which he celebrated in prison. Not where I want to celebrate my 28th birthday, although I came extremely close once or twice. But he has so far raised about $1.5 million in legal fees from the public for his defense, which is insane when you consider they all know he committed the crime. So I think that's the whole social media effect. He's a nice looking young man, the nature of the case. So that's going well for him. So he's got his lawyers know they're getting paid. He's also received some legal victories. In state court, the terrorism charges that were filed in New York State court were dismissed on technical grounds. So while that is a victory, I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make when you consider, he still has the most serious charge of the second-degree murder charge that he's facing, which is going to carry the most time. And he still has other state-related charges, most of which I'm certain are going to stick. So although, hey, it's a victory in itself to get a charge dismissed, I don't know to what extent the state terrorism charge being dismissed, how much that's really going to benefit him in the long run. Now, the big victory for him, the huge victory, is that the murder charge in federal court was recently dismissed on technical grounds. That's huge. And the reason that is huge is because the Department of Justice had expressed their intent to seek the death penalty against him.
Okay, and I was going to ask about where the death penalty came from and how some of the charges being dropped were going to affect that decision and how they could.
Major decision. Ultimately, in the federal prosecution, the fact that the murder charge was dismissed means that the Department of Justice is unable to proceed with the death penalty if he's convicted, which is just huge for him. That is off the table.
And it's crazy to say if he is convicted, considering, like you said, he did it.
I'm certain he'll be convicted, but that is huge for a person, going to trial because number one, it affects your worst case scenario if you get convicted, taking death off the table, and two, it also affects the negotiating and plea bargaining because whenever you're negotiating, typically what happens is the Department of Justice or the prosecutor agrees to make certain concessions in exchange for a guilty plea. I'll reduce the charges. I'll drop some of the charges. I'll take the death penalty off the table and let you plead to life in prison. Well, now, if the death penalty is not on the table, that can't be a negotiating chip, in order to get them to plead guilty. They can't say, hey, we'll let you plead to life in prison. And, if you plead to these charges, then we'll take the death penalty off the table. Well, that's not an option now. And, I want to be clear that, so everyone understands that murder is not a federal crime. State court and federal court are completely separate sets of crimes. Okay. And honestly, technically it varies from state to state. The elements of a armed robbery or carjacking in South Carolina may not be exactly the same in North Carolina or Florida or New York. So you could commit the same crime and it not be a crime in other states or in federal court. But murder is a state court crime. There's no direct main predicate offense for murder in federal court. In order for there to be a murder charge in federal court, there's got to be a predicate federal offense that's associated with that murder. Okay. And in this case, he was indicted for the murder while during the commission of a crime of violence. And the court dismissed the murder charge because there was no underlying federal crime of violence that was associated with the murder. Now, and you may be wondering, well, how can you say shooting somebody with a gun is not a crime of violence? Okay, that sounds like a crime of violence to me.
Yeah.
And that's correct. I can understand that. But, in federal court, crime of violence is a statutory phrase. And there are very specific elements that a federal crime of violence has got to meet. So it can't just be, well, it's a violent crime, so it's a crime of violence. No, it's got to meet certain statutory definitions and elements. It didn't meet those.
Okay.
So as a result, the underlying murder charge was dismissed, and he is not facing the death penalty in federal court.
Okay. And then going back to kind of more of like the social side, how or if could that affect the lawsuit? Aside from obviously the money standpoint of everybody feeding him all this money, can that have any role in it?
When the lawsuit, no. I mean, if and I'm not aware of any lawsuits. I'm not saying
you
that
were
not
just
any.
saying that everybody was basically praising him. So I wouldn't think that judges would be like, oh, well, the social media loves him, so I'm going to say not guilty. But, I mean, big impacts on people that are loved by a lot. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and I think you saw some of that, the closest thing I can think about that's similar would be the Menendez brothers.
Because I was going to say that. I've seen a bunch of people being like, dang, I couldn't focus on the trial because they're so hot. And it was like, what? They like killed, there was all these charges against him and whatever.
Yeah, well, my understanding was most people were just, they sympathized with them based on the allegations that they were abused by, sexually abused by their father. And, there were, and again, social media. I mean, everybody has a big microphone, a big megaphone, and can put their position out there. And just because you have people that have a strong opinion out there, talking about it doesn't mean they're the majority. Mm-hmm. But the loudest, the loudest you heard from people were people that felt that they were unjustly prosecuted or convicted because their father sexually abused them. And, I'd always said that even if that was true, and I did a podcast on the Menendez brothers, even if the father did sexually abuse him, when you look at how those murders are carried out, that was not self-defense.
Yeah.
I mean, they plotted to murder him and set up a fake alibi, and they killed their mother. They killed their mother while she was and shot her again with a shotgun, blew her brains out while she was on her knees crawling toward them. And then after they shot her, they went back to their car to reload the shotgun and shot her again. Okay? I mean, okay, so no. And that's the thing about the public. They'll get on social media, they'll read headlines, they form opinions and don't have all the facts, and they just get behind somebody.
Yeah.
That's just the way things are right now. I do not think it's going to affect the trial in any respect. It's going to help with legal fees. I think they're clearly going to keep raising the money, and they'll make him a folk hero, and there'll be a lot of social media pages about him. But I don't see those things affecting the outcome of either criminal trial.
All right, I want to hear some more of your thoughts. What do you think about the Federal Reserve charges being dismissed? What is significant about it? What do you have to add?
Well, I've got some opinions on that I've expressed in other videos and podcasts. I mean, it just shows, I've been saying for a long time that this president has been reshaping the Department of Justice, not based on qualifications, but based on loyalty and ideology. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, when Pam Bondi made that decision to charge him with murder and announce her decision to, seek the death penalty, I mean, she didn't know what the hell she was doing. I mean, that's just the bottom line, Mm-hmm. And an experienced prosecutor who understands the federal system would have known that there was no real legitimate basis to charge with murder instead of in federal court, and wouldn't have done so. And I've talked about it. We've seen that with this current Department of Justice. People that are prosecutors that have been there for 15, 20 years that understand the federal laws, understand the federal process, they're being fired. They've been fired, or they're being asked to do things they think are unethical, mm-hmm. inappropriate, and in some cases illegal, and they're resigning.
And if not, indictment.
Exactly. And what you have right now, the Department of Justice has a huge number of vacancies right now. I mean, and the majority of the people that are there are going to be loyalists or new, fresh out of law school, attorneys with no experience that have all these caseloads dumped on them just to have a job. But ultimately, what you have is a Department of Justice that is wholly unqualified and ill-equipped to prosecute federal criminal trials and federal criminal cases around the country, and not just in this case. I said the same thing when the president, pushed to have former FBI Director James Comey indicted. When the Attorney General wouldn't do it because he felt there was some insufficient evidence, he fired the Attorney General and appointed someone that had no experience. I think her name was Halligan. Didn't know what she was doing, but within 2 days of being appointed, she indicted James Comey. Well, what happened to that case? It got dismissed. Yeah. He instructed the Department of Justice to indict Letitia James because she's the person that prosecuted him in the in New York State Court. I hate to say prosecuted, but sued his company and got the big civil fraud verdict against the Trump company, Trump organization. He had them indict her. What happened to that case? It got dismissed. And just ultimately, that's what's happening. And what's going to start happening around the country is these U.S. attorneys are going to start getting their asses handed to them by experienced criminal defense attorneys who actually know what they're doing in federal court.
Yeah, because we talked about Don Lemon. You have told me about Jean Carroll.
Oh, yeah. And of course, now Jean Carroll, now the Department of Justice wants to step in and defend him in a civil suit that he lost in trial and lost to appeal.
He's making them his bitch.
And I've said that. I've said that for a while. I said it a long time ago that I saw it coming, that what he wants to do is pretty much shape the Department of Justice into being, instead of an independent, qualified, agency that prosecutes federal crimes in this country, he wants to convert them to be his own personal legal hit team, which is what he's done. There's no doubt about it. And the effect of that is, they're keeping him happy, but these federal criminal prosecutions are taking hits, and they're going to start taking hits. And what that means is, it's not just the James Comey and Letitia James and things like that. They prosecute the big drug dealers. They prosecute the human trafficking cases. They prosecute the individuals that commit crimes that affect the entire country. They prosecute individuals, and again using the United Healthcare. Companies like that, the way they're held accountable is they're prosecuted and they're sued by the government for healthcare fraud, and they're forced to pay billions of dollars in fines that goes back to the people that that they screwed out of their money and things like that. So that's what a qualified Department of Justice is supposed to do. And right now, all those types of things, I don't think they're going to be prosecuted very well, and in some cases not at all, because this administration, they have not made that a priority. Their priority are political prosecutions at this point, and people that are loyal to the president and support his ideology of how the country's supposed to be. So, but the function of prosecuting truly violent criminals and drug traffickers and sexual predators and human, child traffickers, those cases are going to start taking beatings in court.
Is there anything you would do differently to defend him, or is there anything you think that they should be focusing on to make him guilty and get him, life in prison?
Well, I think the case is, a pretty slam dunk on this case. And I think his lawyers are doing an excellent job because they're getting charges dismissed. And, to the extent of, what I do differently, not a whole lot, if anything, because when you have someone in a criminal charge, and sometimes, the majority of times, truth be told, the defendants are guilty. Even if they're not guilty of every single thing they're charged with, they're typically guilty of some of those charges. That's just the reality of the majority of handling criminal offense cases. And what you have to kind of keep in mind is winning a case or having a victory is not always an all or nothing. If you're arrested and you are facing the death penalty, and you pay me $2 million in legal fees, and you still get convicted at trial, but you don't get the death penalty, you get life in prison or 30 years in prison, you got your money's worth. you know, and a lot of times, you know, you would have clients are notorious thinking, hey, I paid this guy $50,000 and I still did 10 years, 15 years in prison. But they don't think about, well, they're facing 40 or 50 years in prison. And you look anybody, I challenge you, you look anybody in the face, you look anybody in the eye and say, okay, well, how much is 20 or 30 years of your life worth? Would you pay $100,000 to have 30 more years of your life outside of prison? I would. Okay. But people don't often think about it that way. That's why I try to break it down that way. So they've already got a victory. They've taken the death penalty off the table. And, you know, if they can get some of the other charges reduced and use the federal sentencing guidelines to their benefit. And I say that because in federal court, sentencing is different than in state court. In federal, you know, in state court, you're charged with something that's 0 to 20, 0 to 30, or 5 to 25, and the judge can give you anywhere in that range. In federal court, there's something called the sentencing guidelines, where there's a rule book with all these different factors that have to be taken into account before a person can be sentenced. Mm-hmm. And you really have to understand those federal sentencing guidelines so you can calculate the sentencing range for a person that's convicted or pleads guilty to a federal statute. So I believe his lawyers are better than the lawyers that are prosecuting him, certainly in federal court. And I think they're doing a good job. And I don't know how much good it's going to do, but I definitely can't say that I'd be handling the case any better or any differently.
All right. Give me your final thoughts.
Well, Kayla, I got to call it like I see it. Technical legal mumbo jumbo aside, incompetence of the Department of Justice aside, Mangione committed a cold-blooded murder. I think it is actually horrible and sad that people in our country would get behind someone that does that. Yes, United Healthcare had some horrible business practices, but there are legal mechanisms to deal with that. You know, I mean, there are class action lawsuits that people complain we greedy trial lawyers are filing these class actions. Well, this is the kind of case that class actions are made for. There's action by the government to prosecute or sue these companies civilly to get money to reimburse individuals that suffered as a result of any kind of misconduct. A cold-blooded murder of an individual, that's not the way. That's not the way that I think it needs to be done. And I think it's insane that people are actually supporting him and cheering him on and paying for his legal fees. Ultimately, I believe, despite the fact that his lawyers are doing a great job for him, I mean, he's got serious charges in state and federal court for which he is guilty. I don't believe any amount of social media folklore or conduct by the health insurance carrier. I mean, none of that stuff is going to come in trial. And none of it is relevant at trial. None of it's going to be admitted in trial. A jury never hear about it. And he will likely spend the rest of his life in prison, where he belongs, might I add. Now, you might not agree with me. You might think he's a folk hero and should be awarded for, taking up this cause. I really don't give a damn. However, do me a favor, post your comments, post your questions, call it like you see it. That's it.